I'm a millionaire and was in a hurry to go to an expensive hotel. I ran into a cleaning lady. She was bent over, cleaning the floor. When I saw who she was, I was very surprised. I never imagined that spilling coffee on a guest's expensive suit would change my life forever. Working at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Manhattan wasn't just a job for me. It was my lifeline, my chance to build something meaningful after leaving my small town in Ohio. That fateful morning in September, I was rushing through my usual routine, balancing a tray of fresh coffee for the executive breakfast meeting in Conference Room A. The marble floors of the hotel gleamed under the crystal chandeliers, and I was lost in thought about my evening classes at the community college when it happened. A sudden movement, a quick turn, and there he was, Alexander Sterling, though I didn't know who he was at the time. All I knew was that I had just drenched a man wearing what looked like a suit that cost more than my yearly salary in scalding hot coffee. "I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, frantically grabbing napkins from my apron. "Please, let me help you." My hands were shaking as I tried to damage control what could very well be my last day at work. But instead of the angry outburst I expected, I heard a warm chuckle. Looking up, I met the most striking blue eyes I'd ever seen. They crinkled at the corners as he smiled, and something in my chest fluttered. "Well, this is certainly an interesting way to start my morning," he said, accepting the napkins with grace. "I was actually hoping for my coffee in a cup, but I suppose wearing it works too." His playful tone put me at ease, though my cheeks burned with embarrassment. "Miss," he paused, looking at my name tag, "Sarah Mitchell, would you join me for a proper coffee later? One that we can drink rather than wear?" The invitation caught me completely off guard. Here was this incredibly handsome man, in a ruined designer suit, asking me out for coffee instead of demanding my termination. I'm working," I stammered, suddenly very aware of my simple uniform and messy ponytail. "And I should really report this incident to my supervisor." "I'll speak with your supervisor," he offered, pulling out a business card from his jacket pocket. "I'm Alexander Sterling, and I actually own a significant stake in this hotel chain. I insist on making this right, though in this case I believe I'm the one who should apologize for not watching where I was going." My world tilted slightly on its axis as I read the card. Alexander Sterling, CEO of Sterling Enterprises. I'd seen his name in the business sections of newspapers I arranged in the hotel lobby every morning. He was one of New York's most eligible bachelors and a regular fixture in social magazines. Not that I ever imagined meeting him, let alone dumping coffee on him. To my surprise, he was nothing like the cold, calculating businessman the media portrayed. His eyes held genuine warmth, and there was something almost vulnerable in the way he waited for my response. "I get off at 4, I found myself saying against my better judgment. "But you really don't have to do this, Mr. Sterling. I'm the one who ruined your suit." "Please call me Alex," he insisted, "and I have plenty of suits, Sarah. What I don't have is the pleasure of knowing the story behind the woman brave enough to give me an impromptu coffee shower." His smile was disarming, genuine in a way that made my defenses crumble. That afternoon we met at a small cafe 3 blocks from the hotel. I had changed into my regular clothes, just jeans and a simple blouse, and felt painfully aware of how out of place I must look in his world. But Alex had also changed, wearing casual clothes that somehow made him look even more handsome, if that was possible. We talked for hours. He listened intently as I shared my dreams of finishing my degree in sustainable fashion design, my struggle to make ends meet in the city, and my determination to prove that someone from a small town could make it in New York. To my surprise, he opened up too, about the pressure of running a global corporation, his passion for environmental innovation, and the loneliness of living in a world where everyone wanted something from him. "You're different," he said suddenly, studying me with those intense blue eyes. "You're real. Do you know how rare that is in my world?" I laughed nervously, stirring my 3rd cup of coffee. "I'm just me, Alex, nothing special about being real." "That's where you're wrong," he replied softly. "Being genuine is the most special quality someone can have, especially in this city." As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the cafe windows, I realized we had spent nearly 4 hours talking. It felt like minutes. When Alex asked if he could see me again, my heart raced with equal parts excitement and fear. I knew I was standing on the edge of something that could either be magical or disastrous. "Yes," I answered, surprising myself with my certainty, "but on one condition: no more ruined suits." His laughter echoed through the cafe, drawing curious glances from other patrons. "I think I can manage that," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand gently. "Though I have to admit, that coffee incident might be the best thing that's happened to me in years." As I walked home that evening, my mind spinning with thoughts of blue eyes and genuine smiles, I had no idea that this was just the beginning. I couldn't have known that this chance encounter would lead to a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about love, success, and the power of being true to oneself. But sometimes, the best stories start with a simple spilled cup of coffee. The weeks following my coffee mishap with Alex felt like living in two parallel universes. By day, I continued my routine at the Grand Plaza Hotel, serving breakfast to business executives and tidying up conference rooms. By night, I found myself swept into Alex's world of fine dining and cultural galas, feeling like a modern-day Cinderella, albeit one who still had to wake up at 5 a.m. for her morning shift. "You don't have to keep working at the hotel," Alex suggested one evening as we strolled through Central Park. The autumn leaves crunched beneath our feet, and I pulled my second-hand coat tighter against the chill. "I could help you focus on your studies full-time." I stopped walking and turned to face him. "That's exactly why I need to keep working," I explained, watching his expression carefully. "I have to do this on my own, Alex. My independence isn't negotiable." Instead of being offended, he smiled that warm smile that made my knees weak. "And that's exactly why I'm falling for you," he said, pulling me close. "You're the first person in years who wants me for me, not for what I can give them." But maintaining my principles wasn't always easy, especially when Alex's world began to seep into mine. Like the evening he surprised me at work, walking into the hotel kitchen where I was restocking supplies. My co-worker's jaws dropped as the infamous Alexander Sterling, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, casually leaned against the industrial refrigerator. "Mr. Sterling, you can't be in here," I hissed, painfully aware of the whispers around us. "There are health regulations and—" "I just closed a deal that will revolutionize sustainable energy in 3 continents, he interrupted, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "And the only person I wanted to share it with was you. Have dinner with me?" How could I say no to that? But as we left together, I could feel the stares of my co-workers burning into my back. The next day, the break room buzzed with gossip. Some were supportive, but others, well, their snide comments about gold diggers and social climbers stung more than I cared to admit. "They're just jealous," my best friend and fellow waitress Lucy assured me during our lunch break. "But Sarah, you need to be careful. Men like Alexander Sterling, they live in a different world." I knew she was right, but I also knew there was more to Alex than his wealth and status, like how he remembered every detail I told him about my family back in Ohio, or how he sat through my lengthy explanations about sustainable fabric sourcing with genuine interest. Or the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't noticing, like I was something precious he couldn't quite believe was real. Our worlds collided in unexpected ways. One Saturday, I convinced him to help me at a local community center, where I volunteered teaching basic sewing skills to underprivileged teens. Alex showed up in designer casual wear, completely out of his element, but threw himself into learning alongside the kids. By the end of the day, he had managed to sew a completely crooked tote bag and had gained the admiration of every teenager in the room. "You know," he said as we cleaned up, his fingers intertwining with mine, "I've sat through $1,000 million negotiations that felt less intimidating than trying to sew a straight line in front of those kids. But for every perfect moment, there were challenges." Like the evening Alex took me to a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I'd spent weeks altering a thrift store dress to make it suitable for the occasion, but I still felt out of place among the designer gowns and family heirlooms. "Alexander, darling," a voice called out, and I turned to see Victoria Sinclair, Alex's ex-girlfriend, gliding toward us in a dress that probably cost more than my yearly rent. And, "Oh, you must be the hotel maid everyone's talking about." The way she said maid made it sound like a contagious disease. I felt Alex tense beside me, but before he could speak, I straightened my spine and smiled. "Actually, I prefer hospitality specialist," I replied smoothly. "And I'm also a fashion design student. Your dress is beautiful. Is it last season's Valentino?" The silhouette is quite similar to their fall collection. Victoria's perfectly painted lips tightened, and Alex's hand found the small of my back, his touch reassuring and proud. Later that night, as we swayed together on the dance floor, he whispered, "You handled that beautifully, though I think you might have created an enemy for life." "Should I be worried?" I asked, only half joking. "About Victoria? No, about how completely in love with you I'm becoming. Absolutely." The words hung between us, heavy with meaning and possibility. As October turned to November, our relationship deepened, but so did the complications. Alex's business partner, James Morrison, watched me with calculating eyes whenever we crossed paths. The tabloids began to run speculative pieces about the mystery woman in Alexander Sterling's life. And then there was Alex's mother, Eleanor Sterling, who had yet to acknowledge my existence despite Alex's attempts to arrange a meeting. But in quiet moments, like when Alex would visit my tiny apartment and we'd cook dinner together, or when we'd walk through the city at night discussing our dreams and fears, none of that seemed to matter. In those moments, we weren't the billionaire and the hotel worker. We were just Alex and Sarah, two people discovering that sometimes the heart knows better than society's rules. What I didn't know then was that our greatest challenges were still ahead, and that the foundation we were building would soon be tested in ways neither of us could have imagined. But for now, I was learning that true love doesn't try to change you. It gives you the courage to become more fully yourself. December arrived in New York with a flurry of snowflakes and secrets. I was beginning to understand that dating one of Manhattan's most eligible bachelors meant living under constant scrutiny. Every coffee run, every goodnight kiss outside my apartment building seemed to end up photographed by someone. But it wasn't the paparazzi that worried me. It was the growing weight of my own unspoken truth. The morning everything changed started normally enough. I was in Alex's penthouse, curled up on his leather couch, sketching designs for my final project, while he handled some business calls. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Central Park, dusted with snow, and I felt almost peaceful. Almost. "Sarah?" Alex's voice pulled me from my thoughts. He was standing in the doorway of his home office, holding a manila envelope with a troubled expression. "We need to talk." My heart stopped. Those 4 words never preceded anything good. He sat beside me, the envelope heavy in his hands. "James had a private investigator look into your background." "He did what?" I sat up straight, my sketchbook falling to the floor. "Why would he?" "Because he doesn't trust that you're really who you say you are," Alex replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. "He was convinced you must have some ulterior motive. But Sarah, why didn't you tell me about Marcus?" The name hit me like a physical blow. Marcus, my brief marriage at 19 that I'd spent years trying to forget. The shame and fear came rushing back, making it hard to breathe. I was going to tell you," I whispered, my fingers twisting in my lap. "I just didn't know how. It's not exactly first date conversation material." Alex's hand found mine, steady and warm. "Tell me now, please." So I did. I told him about growing up in foster care, about meeting Marcus when I was 18 and desperate for belonging, how he seemed so charming at first, then slowly began to control every aspect of my life. The marriage that lasted 6 months before I finally found the courage to leave, with nothing but a backpack and a few $100s. The divorce was finalized 3 years ago, I finished, wiping away tears I hadn't realized were falling. I came to New York to start over, to become someone new, someone stronger. Alex was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "Why were you afraid to tell me?" "Because look at you, Alex. You're perfect on paper. Ivy League education, impeccable background, family dynasty. And I'm damaged goods. A foster kid who made a terrible mistake and ran away." "Stop." His voice was firm but gentle. "You're a survivor. You're the strongest person I know. And nothing in this envelope changes how I feel about you." He tossed the envelope into the fireplace without opening it, watching as the flames consumed whatever other secrets James had uncovered. "But your reputation." "My reputation?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sarah, do you know what my reputation was before I met you? Cold, calculating, the ice prince of Wall Street. You've made me human again." He pulled me close and I breathed in the familiar scent of his cologne. "I love you," he said softly. "All of you. Your past included." But our moment of peace was short-lived. That evening, at a business dinner I'd reluctantly agreed to attend, Victoria made her move. She sashayed to our table, champagne in hand, her smile sharp as a knife. "Oh, Sarah, darling," she purred, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I just heard the most fascinating rumor about your past marriage. Tell me, does Alex know about your tendency to marry men for their money and then run?" The restaurant seemed to freeze. I felt Alex tense beside me, but before he could speak, I stood up. Years of shame and fear crystallized into something harder, something like strength. "Actually, Victoria, since you're so interested in my past, let me tell you about it myself." My voice was steady, carrying across the now silent restaurant. "I married young and foolishly to escape a bad situation. I left with nothing but my dignity and the determination to build a better life. And you know what? I did. I worked my way through school, got a job at one of the best hotels in Manhattan, and met a man who loves me for exactly who I am, past and all." I turned to face the other diners, many of whom I recognized from society pages. "I'm not ashamed of my story. It's made me who I am. And if anyone here thinks that surviving abuse and starting over makes me less worthy of love, then that says more about them than it does about me." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, somewhere in the back, someone started clapping. The applause spread, and Victoria's face turned an interesting shade of red as she retreated to the bar. Later that night, as Alex and I walked through the snowy streets, he stopped under a streetlight and pulled me close. "You know what I thought when you stood up in that restaurant? That I'd completely embarrassed you? That I want to spend the rest of my life with you." His eyes were serious, full of something that looked like awe. "You're extraordinary, Sarah Mitchell, and I don't care what anyone else thinks." As snowflakes caught in his dark hair, I realized something important. Sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest strength, and sometimes the people who truly love us don't just accept our past, they help us transform it into something beautiful. But even as Alex held me under the gentle snowfall, I couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria's public attack was just the beginning. James was still out there, watching and waiting. And somewhere in a mansion on the Upper East Side, Eleanor Sterling was undoubtedly plotting her own intervention. Our love story was far from over, and the next chapters would test us in ways we couldn't imagine. The Sterling family mansion loomed before me, a Georgian masterpiece that had graced the Upper East Side for generations. After 3 months of dating Alex, I was finally meeting his mother, not by choice, but by carefully orchestrated circumstance. Eleanor Sterling had arranged a casual family dinner that we couldn't possibly decline. "Ready?" Alex squeezed my hand as we climbed the marble steps. I smoothed down my dress, a simple but elegant design I'd made myself, hoping it would show Eleanor I had actual talent and ambition. "As I'll ever be," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The door opened to reveal Eleanor Sterling, perfectly coiffed and wearing what I recognized as a Chanel suit that cost more than my yearly rent. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she air-kissed Alex's cheeks. "Alexander, darling, and Sarah, is it? How lovely to finally meet you." Her tone suggested it was anything but lovely. "Do come in. We have so much to discuss." The interior of the mansion was like a museum, filled with priceless artworks and antiques. Family portraits lined the walls, generations of Sterlings looking down at us with the same aristocratic features Alex had inherited. I felt like each painted face was judging me, finding me wanting. Dinner was an exercise in subtle warfare. Eleanor asked seemingly innocent questions that were actually carefully crafted barbs. "Sarah, dear, tell me about your family background. I'm sure you come from interesting stock." "Mother," Alex warned, but I placed my hand on his arm. "Actually, Mrs. Sterling, I grew up in the foster system," I said clearly, meeting her gaze. "It taught me resilience, adaptability, and the value of creating your own destiny. Skills that have served me well in building my career and pursuing my education." Eleanor's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose slightly. "How inspiring. Alexander, did I mention that Charlotte Astor's daughter is back from Paris? You remember Sophia? She's running her own art gallery now." Before Alex could respond, a deep voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, Eleanor." We all turned to see an elderly man entering the dining room, leaning on a carved wooden cane. William Sterling, Alex's grandfather, who I'd heard so much about but never met. "Grandpa," Alex stood, genuine warmth in his voice. "I didn't know you were joining us." "Wouldn't miss it," William replied, his eyes twinkling as he looked at me. So this is the young lady who's got New York society in such a tizzy. Come here, my dear. I approached him nervously, but his warm smile put me at ease. He took my hands in his weathered ones, studying my face. You remind me of someone, he said softly. Someone who also caused quite a stir in her day. Eleanor's fork clattered against her plate. Father, please, it's time they knew, Eleanor. William turned to Alex. Your grandmother wasn't from our world either. She was a seamstress, the most talented one in Brooklyn. I met her when she was altering suits at Bergdorf's. My family was horrified, of course, threatened to disown me. The revelation hung in the air like crystal chimes. Alex looked stunned. But all the stories about grandmother being from a respected Boston family, carefully crafted fiction, William sighed. We gave in to society's pressure, created an acceptable background story. It was the biggest mistake of my life, not standing up for our love publicly. She never quite forgave me for it. Eleanor stood abruptly. Father, that's ancient history. Times were different then. Were they? William challenged. Or are we still letting fear of society's judgment dictate our hearts? As if on cue, Eleanor's housekeeper appeared with a leather folder. The documents you requested, Mrs. Sterling. Eleanor composed herself and took the folder. Since we're discussing history, Sarah, perhaps you'd like to explain these. She slid several papers across the table, documents about my marriage to Marcus. Mother! Alex's voice was sharp with anger, but I touched his arm again. Yes, Mrs. Sterling, I would. My voice was steady as I met her gaze. I married young, to escape a difficult situation. I left when it became abusive, and I rebuilt my life from nothing. I'm not ashamed of my past. It's made me stronger, more compassionate, and absolutely certain of what I want in life. William's laugh broke the tension. Well said, my dear. You know, Eleanor, she reminds me so much of your mother. The same fire, the same dignity. Eleanor's face softened almost imperceptibly. For the first time I saw something like uncertainty in her eyes. Mother always did have a way of standing her ground, she admitted quietly. The rest of the evening shifted subtly. While Eleanor didn't exactly warm to me, her hostility thawed slightly. William regaled us with stories about his romance with Alex's grandmother, painting a picture of a love that defied social conventions. Later in the library, William showed me a hidden panel in the wall. Inside was a small box containing love letters and a simple gold locket. Your grandmother's, he explained to Alex. She wrote to me every day during our forced separation. I kept them all. As Alex read one of the letters, his eyes glistening, William turned to me. Love that crosses social boundaries isn't easy, my dear, but it's often the most genuine kind. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Leaving the mansion that night, Alex was unusually quiet. In the car, he finally spoke. I never knew that about my grandparents. All this time, thinking we had to live up to some perfect family image. Sometimes the most powerful legacy isn't the one written in society papers, I said softly. There's the courage to love authentically. He pulled me close, kissing my temple. I won't make my grandfather's mistake, Sarah. I won't hide what we have or apologize for it. As we drove through the glittering city streets, I thought about William's words and the hidden love letters. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't the ones that fit neatly into society's expectations. They're the ones that dare to write their own rules. But even as we found unexpected allies in Alex's family, I knew our challenges weren't over. The next day's society pages would carry news of our dinner, and with it new speculation about my past. Yet somehow knowing the truth about Alex's grandparents made me feel stronger. We weren't the first to face these obstacles, and we wouldn't be the last. The question was, how would we write our own chapter in this ongoing story of love versus society's expectations? The morning everything exploded started with a notification on my phone. Lucy sent me a link to page 6 with a simple message. Sarah, you need to see this now. The headline made my blood run cold. Sterling's secret lover, the dark past behind the fairy tale. I sat on my tiny apartment's fire escape, hands shaking as I scrolled through the article. Someone, and I had a pretty good idea who, had leaked everything about my past to the press. But they hadn't just exposed my previous marriage. They'd twisted it into something unrecognizable. According to the article, I was a calculated social climber with a history of targeting wealthy men. My phone buzzed continuously with messages and calls, but I could only stare at the photos they'd somehow obtained. Me at 19, bruised and filing a police report against Marcus, documents from the divorce, even pictures of the shelter where I'd stayed briefly after leaving him. My most vulnerable moments splashed across the internet for everyone to see. Alex arrived within an hour looking like he hadn't slept. "I'm so sorry," he said, pulling me into his arms. "James admitted he leaked the information. I've already fired him, but the damage is done," I finished, stepping back to look at him. "Alex, everyone knows now. Your investors, your board members, your social circle. This could hurt your business." "I don't care about the business right now," he insisted, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Sterling Enterprises' stock had already taken a hit, and social media was buzzing with speculation about his judgment in both personal and professional matters. I took a deep breath, an idea forming. What if we controlled the narrative? "What do you mean?" "Instead of hiding or denying anything, what if I told my story? The real story. Not the twisted version they're selling, but the truth about survival, resilience, and the courage to start over." Alex studied me carefully. "You don't have to do this. We could wait it out, let it blow over." "No," I said firmly. "I'm done letting other people tell my story." That afternoon, I sat down for an interview with Claire Bennett, a respected journalist known for her integrity. In her warm, book-lined office, I shared everything. The foster care system, meeting Marcus, the abuse, the escape, and my journey to rebuild my life. The hardest part wasn't leaving, I told her, my voice steady. It was believing I deserved better. Every woman who's ever faced abuse needs to know they deserve better, regardless of their background or circumstances. When Claire asked about Alex, I smiled genuinely. He saw me for who I am, not what happened to me. Our relationship isn't a fairy tale. It's better, it's real. We're two people who found each other despite our different worlds, not because of them. The article was published the next day. The response was overwhelming. My inbox filled with messages from women sharing their own stories of survival and renewal. Domestic violence organizations reached out about speaking at their events. Even some of New York's most prominent socialites, who'd previously snubbed me at events, sent messages of support. But the most surprising response came from Eleanor Sterling. She arrived at my apartment unannounced, looking somewhat out of place in the narrow hallway with her designer outfit. "I was wrong about you," she said without preamble. "Your courage in telling your story, it reminded me of what William said about my mother, about standing up for what's real." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a photograph of a young woman in simple clothes, standing proudly next to a sewing machine. "Your grandmother?" I asked. Eleanor nodded. "The real her, before society made her hide who she was. I've spent so long trying to maintain the perfect image that I forgot what actually matters." As she left, she paused. "Sarah, that dress you wore to dinner, you designed it yourself, didn't you? It was quite beautiful." Coming from Eleanor, it felt like the highest praise. The media storm continued, but it had shifted. Instead of scandal, they focused on resilience. My small sustainable fashion design business, which I'd been building on the side, suddenly gained attention. People were interested in my story, yes, but also in my work, my ideas, my vision for ethical fashion. Alex stood by me through all of it, his support unwavering. One evening, as we walked through Central Park away from the cameras and chaos, he stopped under our favorite tree. "You know what amazes me," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Every time I think I can't admire you more, you prove me wrong. You took something meant to destroy you and turned it into a platform for helping others. We did it together," I corrected him. "Your strength gave me strength." He smiled, that special smile that still made my heart skip. Speaking of together, he reached into his pocket and my breath caught, but before he could continue, his phone buzzed urgently. The look on his face as he read the message told me our moment of peace was about to end. "What is it?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "James," he said grimly. "He's called an emergency board meeting. He's trying to take control of Sterling Enterprises." I squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of the ring box he hadn't gotten to present. "Then let's face it together. That's what partners do, right?" As we hurried through the darkening park, I realized that sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about perfect moments. They're about choosing each other in the imperfect ones. Whatever James had planned, he was about to learn that Alex and I were stronger together than apart. The board meeting was worse than we anticipated. James had spent months quietly gathering allies, convincing key investors that Alex's relationship with me had clouded his judgment. He presented a series of risky investment decisions Alex had made over the past quarter. Decisions that, while innovative and focused on sustainable development, had yet to show profit. Sterling Enterprises needs stable, traditional leadership, James argued to the board, not someone distracted by scandal and romantic entanglements. I sat in the back of the boardroom, watching Alex defend not just his position, but his vision for the company. He spoke passionately about modernizing their approach, about corporate responsibility and sustainable practices, but I could see the doubt in some board members' eyes. The vote was close, but in the end, Alex retained control, barely. However, the company's stock took another hit, and several major investors pulled out. Within weeks, Sterling Enterprises faced its biggest financial crisis in decades. "We'll have to downsize," Alex said one night, surrounded by financial reports in his penthouse office. "Sell some assets, lay off employees." His voice cracked slightly. These weren't just numbers to him, they were people's livelihoods. I made a decision then, watching him struggle with the weight of it all. "I'm going back to full-time work at the hotel." He looked up sharply. "Sarah, no, you're finally getting recognition for your designs. You can't give that up." "I'm not giving it up," I assured him, perching on his desk. "I'm just pressing pause. My designs can wait a few months. Right now, we need stability." "We?" His eyes softened. "This isn't your burden to bear." "That's where you're wrong," I said firmly. "Partners share burdens. Besides, I'm good at my job, and the hotel's new sustainability program needs experienced staff." The next morning, I walked into the Grand Plaza Hotel, not as Alex Sterling's girlfriend, but as Sarah Mitchell, hospitality specialist. Some of my old colleagues were surprised to see me back, but Lucy welcomed me with open arms. "Girl, you're crazy," she said as we restocked linens. "You could be living the high life, and instead you're back here with us." "The high life isn't worth much if you lose yourself getting there," I replied, thinking of Alex's grandmother and her hidden identity. Over the next few months, we settled into a new rhythm. I worked morning shifts at the hotel, spent afternoons developing my sustainable fashion line on a smaller scale, and evenings helping Alex strategize the company's recovery. We downsized to a smaller office, and Alex sold his penthouse, moving into my modest apartment despite my protests. "It's actually nice," he said, arranging his designer suits in my tiny closet. "Reminds me of my first apartment in college, before the family money kicked in." Living together in my small space showed me new sides of Alex. He was hopeless at laundry, but surprisingly good at cooking. He worked late into the night on company documents, but never forgot to leave little notes for me to find in the morning. We learned to navigate around each other in the cramped bathroom, to share the single comfortable chair by the window, to make love quietly because the walls were thin. One evening, I came home to find him on our fire escape, shirt sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, staring at the sunset. "I had an interesting meeting today," he said as I joined him. "Remember that sustainable energy project I was working on before everything happened?" I nodded. It had been one of the risky investments James had criticized. "Well, the preliminary results came in. It works, Sarah. Better than we projected. If we can secure new investors, this could turn everything around." The hope in his voice made my heart swell. "That's amazing, Alex. Have you told the board?" His smile faltered slightly. "That's the thing. The only investor interested right now is Victoria's father." My stomach dropped. Victoria Sinclair's family owned one of the largest investment firms in the city. Their support would save Sterling Enterprises, but at what cost? "There's more," Alex continued. "They'll only invest if I agree to certain conditions, including installing Victoria as co-CEO. I let that sink in. "They want you to work side by side with your ex-girlfriend, the same woman who tried to destroy my reputation." "Yes." He turned to face me, his eyes serious. "I wanted you to hear it from me first, but Sarah, I need you to know I'm turning them down." "What?" "Alex, no. This could save your company, your employees' jobs, at the cost of my integrity, of us." He shook his head. "I've learned something these past few months. Success means nothing if you compromise who you are to achieve it." I looked at him then, really looked at him. His clothes were less pristine than before. There were worry lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago, but he seemed lighter somehow, more real. "We'll figure something out," I said, taking his hand. "We always do." What I didn't tell him was that I'd been working on something too. My small sustainable fashion line had caught the attention of a major eco-friendly retailer. They wanted to collaborate, but I'd been hesitating, worried about dividing my attention during the crisis. Maybe it was time to take that leap. After all, Alex had taught me something too. Sometimes the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards. As we sat together on the fire escape, watching the city lights come alive, I began to formulate a plan. It wasn't just about saving Alex's company anymore. It was about building something new together. The next morning would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But for now, in our small corner of New York, we had everything we needed: each other, our integrity, and the courage to keep dreaming big. Spring arrived in New York with a burst of cherry blossoms and unexpected opportunities. My collaboration with the eco-friendly retailer, Green Thread, had evolved into something bigger than I'd imagined. They weren't just interested in my designs, they wanted to invest in a complete sustainable fashion line that would integrate with Sterling Enterprises' green energy initiatives. "It's perfect," I explained to Alex one morning, spreading sketches across our small kitchen table. "Your company provides the sustainable energy and manufacturing technology. Green Thread handles distribution, and my designs bridge the gap between eco-friendly and high fashion." Alex studied the business plan I'd spent weeks developing. "This could work," he said slowly, his eyes lighting up with the first real hope I'd seen in months. "But Sarah, are you sure?" This would mean stepping into the spotlight in a big way. Before I could answer, there was a knock at our door. We opened it to find a small girl, maybe 7 years old, standing in our hallway. She was wearing a hotel uniform several sizes too big, complete with a name tag that read Sarah. "Are you the real Sarah?" she asked, looking up at me with serious eyes. "The one from the hotel who designs dresses now." Her mother appeared behind her, apologetic. "I'm so sorry. We live down the hall. Emma insisted on wearing her Halloween costume to show you. She wants to be just like you when she grows up." Something shifted in my chest as I knelt down to Emma's level. "Want to see some real designs?" I asked, gesturing to my sketches. Her eyes lit up as she nodded enthusiastically. As Emma pored over my drawings, asking questions about sustainable fabric and design, I caught Alex watching us with a soft expression. Later, after our neighbors left, he pulled me close. "You're going to change lives with this, you know," he murmured into my hair. "Not just with the business, but by showing people what's possible." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The board approved the partnership with Green Thread, impressed by the potential for innovation and profit. Even Eleanor Sterling made a personal investment, surprising everyone by declaring that the future of fashion should be both sustainable and stylish. But amid the business excitement, something else was happening. Emma became a regular visitor, bringing her own fashion sketches for my approval. Soon, other children from the building joined her, and our small apartment became an informal after-school fashion design club. "They need a real space," Alex said one evening, watching me teach the kids about different fabric types. "And proper equipment." That's how the Sarah Mitchell Design Academy was born, a free program for underprivileged youth interested in sustainable fashion and business. We converted part of Sterling Enterprises' downsized office space into a teaching studio, complete with sewing machines and design stations. The program attracted attention from unexpected places. Social workers began referring foster children with an interest in fashion. Domestic violence shelters sent women looking to develop job skills. What started as a simple after-school program evolved into something much more meaningful. One day, while helping a teenage girl adjust a pattern, I felt a familiar flutter in my stomach, one I'd been experiencing more frequently lately. Alex and I had been so busy with our various projects that we hadn't discussed the pregnancy test I'd taken 3 weeks ago, or the happy tears we'd shared when it showed positive. "Miss Sarah," Emma tugged at my sleeve, "can we make baby clothes too? My mom says you're going to need them." News traveled fast in our building, apparently. "Yes," I laughed, touching my still flat stomach. "I suppose we will." That evening, Alex came home with excitement in his eyes. "The sustainable energy project is officially a success," he announced. "And there's more. Remember that old textile factory outside the city? The one that closed down last year?" I nodded, curious where this was going. "I bought it," he said. "We're going to convert it into a green manufacturing facility for your fashion line. But here's the best part. We're adding a community center wing with an expanded design academy and childcare facilities for working parents." "Alex," I started, overwhelmed by the implications. "Wait, there's more." He took my hands in his. "The factory has an attached house, a beautiful old Victorian that needs some love. I thought maybe it could be our home, a place where our child could grow up surrounded by creativity and purpose." Tears welled in my eyes as I imagined it. Our family, our business, our dreams all growing together. "It's perfect," I whispered. "We've come a long way from spilled coffee, haven't we?" He smiled, placing a gentle hand on my stomach. As we stood there in our tiny apartment, surrounded by fabric swatches and children's design sketches, I realized something profound. Sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as challenges. Every obstacle we'd faced, the scandal, the financial crisis, the social pressure, had led us here, to this moment of perfect clarity. We were building more than a business or a family. We were creating a legacy of love, purpose, and possibility. And somewhere in that old Victorian house, our child would grow up knowing that the most beautiful designs aren't just made of fabric and thread, but of dreams and determination. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of hope, when Emma and her friends burst in, excited about their latest projects. "Has Alex helped them set up their sewing machines?" I touched my stomach again, smiling. Our greatest adventure was just beginning. 10 years have passed since that fateful morning when I spilled coffee on Alexander Sterling's expensive suit. Standing in the garden of our restored Victorian home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I can hardly believe how much has changed. The Sarah Mitchell Sustainable Fashion Empire, as the magazines call it, has revolutionized the industry. Our green manufacturing facility employs hundreds of people, many of them graduates of our design academy. The community center has become a beacon of hope, offering not just fashion education, but also support services for those rebuilding their lives. "Mom?" Our 9-year-old daughter, Grace, comes running across the lawn, her dark curls bouncing. She's wearing one of her own designs, a dress made from recycled materials that would make any fashion designer proud. Behind her walks our adopted son, Marcus. Yes, we chose that name deliberately, turning a symbol of pain into one of healing, carrying his latest architectural drawings. At 12, he's already showing Alex's business acumen and my creative spirit. "Emma's here," Grace announces excitedly. Emma, now 17, has grown from that little girl in an oversized hotel uniform into a promising young designer. She's our first scholarship recipient for fashion school, and her sustainable children's wear line is already generating buzz in the industry. Alex emerges from his home office, where he's been on a video call with our international partners. Sterling Enterprises has become a global leader in sustainable technology and ethical business practices. The crisis that nearly destroyed us ended up being our greatest catalyst for change. "Ready for the anniversary party?" he asks, wrapping his arms around me. "Tonight we're celebrating 10 years of the Design Academy, though it's really a celebration of so much more." The garden fills with guests as the evening progresses. I see Lucy, now the hotel's general manager, chatting with Eleanor Sterling, who has become one of our strongest advocates and most devoted grandmother. William Sterling, though older now, still tells anyone who'll listen about his seamstress wife who started it all. Victoria Sinclair arrives with her wife. Yes, life has a way of surprising us. After her father's investment firm went bankrupt, karma perhaps, she found both herself and true love. Now she runs a successful LGBTQ+ youth support program at our community center. Even James Morrison is here, humbled by time and circumstance. After his attempted takeover failed, he spent years trying to compete with Sterling Enterprises, only to finally realize that the future belonged to those who dared to change. Now he consults for our sustainability initiatives, turning his business expertise toward positive change. As I look around at our gathered family, both blood and chosen, I'm struck by how every challenge we faced led us here. The exposure of my past didn't destroy me. It gave others courage to face their own truths. The financial crisis didn't break us. It showed us what really mattered. Every obstacle became a building block for something greater than ourselves. Grace tugs at my hand, pulling me toward the small stage we've set up. "Time for your speech, Mum." Looking out at the faces before me, students, employees, friends, family, I feel overwhelming gratitude. 10 years ago, I begin, I thought success meant proving myself to the world. Today I know it means being true to yourself and lifting others as you rise. I tell them about Emma and all the children who found their passion in our programs, about the domestic violence survivors who've built new lives through our employment initiatives, about the sustainable practices that are changing not just fashion, but the way businesses think about their impact on the world. But most of all, I continue, finding Alex's eyes in the crowd, this is a story about love, not the kind you read about in fairy tales, but the kind that rolls up its sleeves and does the hard work, the kind that believes in second chances and sees possibility where others see problems. As if on cue, Grace and Marcus join me on stage, followed by Emma and a group of our current students. They're wearing designs that tell their own stories, of hope, resilience, and dreams made real. This is our legacy, I finish, my voice full of emotion. Not the buildings we've built or the clothes we've designed, but the lives we've touched and the changes we've inspired. Later, as music fills the garden and stars begin to appear, Alex and I dance slowly on the lawn where we first imagined our future. "Any regrets?" he asks, though he knows the answer. "Only that we can't go back and tell our younger selves that everything works out better than they could imagine," I reply. He laughs, pulling me closer. "Would we have believed it? A sustainable fashion empire, 2 amazing kids, a community that's changing lives, and spilled coffee that turned into forever," I add, resting my head on his shoulder. Around us, our garden is full of life and love. Grace teaching Emma's little sister to twirl in her sustainable dress, Marcus showing William his latest designs, Eleanor and Lucy planning the next community center expansion. This is what real success looks like, I realize. Not in magazine headlines or bank accounts, but in the lives we touch and the love we share. As the night wraps around us like a warm embrace, I think about all the young dreamers out there, facing their own obstacles and fighting their own battles. I hope they know that sometimes the hardest challenges lead to the most beautiful destinations. That true love isn't about perfect moments, but perfect acceptance. And that the greatest designs we create aren't made of fabric at all, but of courage, compassion, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserves a chance to write their own story. This is our legacy of love, not just Alex's and mine, but everyone who's been part of our journey. And as I look toward the future, I know our story isn't ending. It's just beginning another beautiful chapter.